Колеги, продовжуємо робочий день. Тема наступного
The topic of the next press briefing: investigation of the brutal dogs murders in Kyiv, urging the law enforcement to act. We would like to invite the Olena Yeskina, public figure, human rights activist, animal rights activist Violetta Levin, and philanthropist and social activist Tereshchenko. Good afternoon to everyone, esteemed friends and colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank you for your interest to this very important topic, because we all understand perfectly well that the attitude to animals defines this civilization level of the society. Unfortunately, we remember when many dogs were poisoned before Euro 2012. Then there were international scandals because of that. Unfortunately, the situation has not improved because the dogs are being poisoned in the streets of Kyiv and they die in tortures. According to the data collected by volunteers, we don't have any official statistical data, but according to the volunteers' data, starting from 2011 till February 2015, there were 3,841 dogs poisoned. And as a rule, these are sterilized dogs with chips, which were taken care of by the citizens of Kyiv or by volunteers. Why don't we have any official statistical data? Because it's about inactivity of law enforcement bodies. Law enforcement bodies do not really react to these cases. In many cases, they do not even go when someone calls about that. If they go, they refuse to sign the act which would register the death of a dog, and they do not give, they do not refer to forensic expert analysis, but unless it's registered, the criminal case cannot be filed. The criminal cases, there were just few criminal cases filed, and we do not see when anyone would be made responsible for killing or for cruel treatment of an animal. 3 persons, but I know that just 3 persons were made administratively responsible and 1 criminally responsible.
However, we will have to check the statistics. I applied to law enforcement bodies, and I hope they will give us such statistics. On the eve of Easter holidays, the situation became much sharper. I went to volunteers to the places where dogs were poisoned, and it was very terrible to see how dogs were dying and suffering a lot. In Glebochitska Street, we were able to make people to compose an act and to detect that, to establish that there was a fact of poisoning, and we will pressurize the law enforcement bodies to bring the killers to responsibility. And the persons of dog hunters in Glebochitska Street were established by people who were witnesses to this, but this is a very seldom fact. What I want to say, my major message is we have to change the problem systematically, in a systemic and targeted way. We've been witnessing that the state was not paying enough attention to this problem, not because our officials did not know how to overcome this problem, but they were just making a good money on this. I will make public some facts now that we were able to establish over the last months when we started to look into the functioning of communal enterprises in the sphere of protection of animals and into other projects that were as if directed to support of the animals. For instance, we had such a project, creation of a cemetery for animals. If you don't know, we can even take you to a sightseeing trip to Pukhivska Street in Kyiv, because on your own you won't be able to find this cemetery, as it is not in the street, but you have to turn somewhere and the road is going to be blocked several times. Then there will be a road checkpoint that won't allow you there. And this object, they spent 13.5 million of our money for this object. Then this budget was increased to 26 million, and 13.5 million was not closed. And there are no documents that would describe the movement of the money in detail. I think that prosecutor's office will look into this, because we applied to the prosecutor's office, but the documents are not being provided in an official way, as they say that this object was transferred through several enterprises, so that the documents become lost. They say that they have transferred this object in the state of 50% readiness, but if you have a look, then there are just 4 sheds, not for 13.5 million. In 2007, $1 cost 5 hryvnia. About this cemetery, and then they wanted to build an abode for in Autoparkova Street with a budget of 32 million hryvnia, and they spent 1 million hryvnia, and most probably it was spent for documentation. There was an electronic database for keeping track of animals, but I still cannot find out how much was paid from the budget for this virtual base, as they are telling me, we are sending you documents for this database, but they send me the documents for developing the database. However, we will publish all those documents, and I hope that those people who were spending our city budget's money in this way will be brought to responsibility at last. And now I want to show you, to demonstrate the treatment of animals. For instance, we have a shelter which has been reorganized in Borodyanka. 7 million, the state was spending 7 million just to pay for the personnel. There are 70 people, and they only spent, they did not allocate budget money for treatment or for feeding those 370 dogs that were kept in this shelter. So you see that the shelters were created in order to give jobs to the personnel. Just to compare, in a private shelter in Hostomel for 1,200 dogs, do you know how many people work? 2 or 3 people. And this is without a kopeck from the city budget. That's why, of course, this sector should be reformed, and we must take European experience where the main burden lies with public organizations that take care of animals, not communal enterprises that just squander our money. And in order for them not to spend the money like they used to, volunteers and rights activists should take the situation under their control. I applied to the Kyiv mayor with an idea to create a public council attached to the mayor, and this initiative was positively reacted to. I hope that the council will be created soon, and we will go to the parliament with our proposals and suggestions to change the current legislation where the strengthening of responsibility is concerned and the creation of an effective mechanism to monitor the killings and bring in those responsible to responsibility, because whatever laws we may have, if our law enforcement bodies do not work and if there is no clear-cut mechanism to bring killers to responsibility, we won't be able to change the situation, as impunity does bring about such cases. I think that I have said the major things. I have some statistics, and if there are questions, then you may ask them. And now I give the floor to Violetta Levin, who is animal rights activist. Thank you. Hello. My questions, my issues were in the format: who are the people who choose the profession of dog hunter and why they choose them? We have to understand that this movement started in Russia. The reasons should be cleared out by the security service of Ukraine, and the biggest group of dog hunters is now in Kyiv. We know 10 of them, not numerous they are, but very active. They kill volunteers, dogs most often chipped and sterilized, and they take special pleasure in killing healthy and chipped dogs and then take pictures of them and send to volunteers. The question is why they choose such a profession. There was a very interesting briefing about the School of Mayors. We may imagine that a successful person, a businessman, a politician, a sportsman, an athlete will spend their time, for instance, following women with saucepans, with porridge to feed their dogs. Then they sit in bushes, they take pictures of dogs, of puppies, then they come back home, they cook poison. Everyone has their own favorite method of killing, as a professional killer would have, and then in the morning, and if they are cowards, then in the night, sometimes because of impunity, they also do this during the daytime, and they poison and they kill volunteers' dogs, often privately owned dogs as well. And now, if they see a dog that they don't like, they can give poison in their palm of their hand to a dog. We can imagine that. Can we imagine that a successful and talented person does this? No, we can't. And more often than not, those are, and there are teenagers among them. In principle, there are two categories that kill animals. The first one is not numerous. Those are people, mentally ill people, and that's their illness. And the more numerous group is natural-born sadists who get satisfaction because live beings are suffering. And there was statistics, the teenagers who kill living beings with the flow of time engage in criminal activity. We see a lot of Russian dog hunters who are in combat on the other side in Donbass, and we have pictures where they stand next to the bodies of soldiers. This is a fact that it does not often finish with animals. And this is very bad when they organize sites that unites people. We are applying to authorities to look into these sites. Teenagers with unhealthy psychology go there. They applaud each other in closed chats. A killer, a slaughterer would come back and they will take a photo and boast in a group of co-thinkers. Animal rights activists are ready to provide every information to law enforcement bodies. They know where those skinflints live, and there's just one small problem, but for us this is huge. Our Minister of Interior does not react. They do not summon witnesses, they do not question them, they just smile because they think that a dog is not serious, but more often than not, this does not finish with a dog. And we see in those closed groups that they have arms and they demonstrate it to each other. And you can get to know a lot of them, about them, if you go into this. However, apart from foreign animal rights activists and our activists who spend a lot of effort to find out who those people are and to find where they are in the hope that the authorities will do something, so far this is a problem of ordinary people who, well, it is understood, people who have an inclination to sadism. Most often they were traumatized in childhood. Those are non-realized in their lives. Such persons who spend hours on end to look for dogs, to look for flocks of dogs, and then they work with video for weeks and weeks on end, and in order to avoid being recognized because of the video. So this is about who chooses this occupation. The second question is why they choose it. Well, first of all, we understand that they are realized, but the protection of fleecer is about their inner state. They are sadists, they are cowards, they are afraid of something new, they are afraid of publicity, and they need to commend a weaker person, a weaker being. This may be a dog, a child, a woman. They need to feel their superiority. There was a research that a person who committed a sadist act will repeat it in 75% of cases. This can be stopped by and the second reason why they choose this occupation is impunity. In principle, you have sadists in every country and every people. The issue is about the reaction of the society to their actions. There's a beautiful film, a German experimental film based on reality. They took students, and within 2 weeks, in certain conditions, usual normal students who were put in a sort of a prison, they started to display qualities of a torturer because they were allowed to commit violence. At the moment, we allow those fleecers, those sadists, to engage in violence. Journalists have filmed hundreds of videos of materials. Journalists were working with us very actively, but these authorities do not work at all. And until they start to work, we will see the increase in the numbers of sadists and fleecers. Younger teenagers are joining in, and we've seen that 9 graders from schools are poisoning dogs. A well-known Fedula who grew on this site, and he was given his credentials on this site, in fact. So this is the threat to our upcoming generation, and this is not the way to Europe. Bodies in the streets, bodies of dogs in the streets of Kyiv or our country is not what our foreign activists and foreign friends of Ukraine applaud us. They help us, they sterilize our dogs, they help us with shelters, but when they later see those killed dogs, you see, and those cheap, sterilized, healthy, and inoculated dogs who cost quite a lot of money lie in the streets killed, they understand that this is a way to nowhere. And at the moment, we're trying to do everything possible and impossible so that the new police, the new Ministry of Interior, who go to the streets so that they are obliged, not like it happens now when they come to the site of the killing with smiles on their faces, but so that they treat these cases seriously. Hello, I pass the floor to Michelle Tereshchenko, who is a philanthropist and social activist, descendant of a prominent Tereshchenko family, and by the way, this was his idea to organize the March of Life, the March of Dogs. Those were owners of dogs who staged a picket against Mr. Avakov, the Minister of Interior. Dear journalists, dear friends, everything in the world, majority of people love and protect dogs, but in the city of Kyiv, regrettably, every day 3 to 5 dogs are dying, and they suffered terribly. They were burnt alive, they are being burnt alive, and this tells us a lot. We all want to build a new civilized European nation, and of course this tells us about the society. I see three consequences. This is not only a shock for people who love dogs. This bears on the image of Ukraine. 70 dogs were burnt during Easter holidays not far from Kyiv in a shelter built by Italians. Next day, 1,500 Italians in Milan gathered in front of the Ukrainian consulate. But here in Ukraine, police refused to launch an investigation. This tells a lot about the international authority and reputation of Ukraine. The second consequence is a risk for the society of such people as dog hunters and sadists who can get satisfaction when they are taking pictures of dying dogs. They can do this with a dog which is absolutely defenseless, but what can they do in addition? They are psychiatrically ill, mentally ill, and of course they should be controlled. We should get to know what they can do tomorrow, not only to dogs, but to people, to kids, to grannies who are also defenseless. But I think that this is a very serious problem. And especially now, because Ukraine of war, and many people here are psychologically and psychiatrically weak. The third consequence that we see, Olena organized the first march of dogs on the 25th of April, but our dogs were renamed by the Minister of the Interior. So they called Minister Avakov Minister Sabakov, Mr. Dog, and no one opened the door, no one accepted the letter, and they came to the president's administration, but there was only a guard and no one wanted to listen to them. So we have to attract attention of our administration, of our ministers and the president, because this situation cannot go on. There will be another march on the 23rd of May, and I hope very much that many people will take part and many dogs will take part. My role is to provide for international resonance, if possible, and of this march, and I think that this time there will be representatives of several international organizations that will help to change Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Any questions, colleagues? Please. Sergei Mulerchuk, Crisis Center, can you tell us if you have international organizations that help you, and do you have a representative in the parliament who would lobby your interests? Of course, we talk to animal rights organizations, and volunteers are constantly in contact with the international community, including the parliament. I think this won't be a problem for animal rights activists. For instance, Olga Bogomolets expressed her preparedness to support us, and I think many other MPs will join in. Thank you. Any other questions? Olena Shubkina, Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. I know that there was an initiative about creating a zoo police, and as far as I know, the investigators, one investigator has now 140 cases on average, and that's why they do not want to look into killing of animals, because they do not think that this is comparable to, for instance, crimes against people. So how the ministry reacted to your initiative about zoo police, animal police? Yes, I did address with the initiative of creation of ecology police that would contain the animal protection police to Mr. Avakov, to the chief department of the Ministry of Interior, but they said that they do not see a need to create such a police, and maybe this issue will be considered when we look into the issue of creating municipal police, and this will be a component in this structure. But why we want to contact the law enforcement bodies? So that they hear the volunteers and animal activists, and they start to work, because we pay them with our taxes, but we don't see any result in this sphere. And we see that there is no money for animals, but there's money for some shady schemes, like, for instance, animal cemetery. They did find millions for this, and no one knows where those millions went. We will try to find out. Tatiana Oharkova, Crisis Media Center, Kyiv. Who in Kyiv is responsible for inoculation of animals? As you said, that there's a lot that is put to the responsibility of volunteers, but don't you think that the inoculation problem should be solved at communal level, at municipal level? And what are the European standards in this respect? At the moment, about jabs, owners inoculate their animals themselves. Sometimes there are events that provide for free inoculation, but the problem is about the lack of control, because they do not control whether the jab was given to a animal. And without such control, you don't know whether the animal is healthy or not. Yes, inoculations are necessary, and most normal owners do inoculate the animals. But the problem is that we do not know what happens in the flats, and police won't go to such cases, or probably they will come, they will smile and go away. But when we talk about homeless animals, and as far as I understand, dog hunters kill mostly homeless animals, is there a program to inoculate homeless dogs? And who is responsible for this? There is such a program, and a dog is being brought to sterilization, and they are given jabs simultaneously. Then Austrians came when they sterilized our dogs. They did give them jabs at the same time. When they get to a clinic, they get number, they are identified, the picture is taken, they are identified, and always this is a healthy, inoculated, and chipped dog. I have a question. As a volunteer, we have relations with foreign countries, and I'm face such problems. For instance, Australian businessmen ask, how can they establish close financial contacts with Ukraine if Ukraine cannot solve such a simple issue as dog hunters? And some Western European countries are asking whether Ukraine does want to join Europe, because such a Russian fascist movement as dog hunting has such an active propaganda in Ukraine. And third, the Ukrainian diaspora in Canada is concerned that violence is actively propagated in Ukraine, violence in relation to defenseless dogs, and people, children and old people are going to be next, and this is a shame for the Ukrainian nation, and Canadian diaspora is very concerned with the problem of the Ukrainian nation, because this is not about just dogs or cats. This is a propaganda of violence that changes the awareness and consciousness of the young generation. So I want to convey these problems to our authorities, how they will answer. Thank you very much. This is the most painful problem. Of course, the society which manifests indifference and cruelty towards animals won't be human in relation to people as well. And the society where the activity of communal enterprises is not transparent, of course, the money won't go there. Now we see the reorganization of 3 communal enterprises, which I mentioned: the shelter enterprise in Borodyanka, the Center of Identification for Animals, and veterinary clinic. And I hope very much that after this reorganization, this single enterprise will work not for the sake of officials who are there, but for the sake of animals, and they will change. Their philosophy will be transparent, and their activity will be understandable for all the Kyivans. And of course, join in, because if animal activists and volunteers don't take this under control, and that's why I was propagating the setting up of a public council. You know, we will be living in virtual transparency, not in real transparency. So please join in, and let's apply maximum efforts to change the situation, and let's make the law enforcement bodies to work, because when there is public pressure, then they may think about the international image of Ukraine, and so on and so forth. Because at the moment their work does not withstand any criticism. I'd like to add, on the 25th of April, we had Mrs. Inna, who is a press secretary to the Embassy of Canada. I know that the Canadian ambassador had very attentively looked at this issue. He couldn't take part at the day, but we will invite him again on the 23rd of May, and the ambassador of Australia, who is who they are very normal people, and they protect everything public and the civil society. Any other questions? No questions. Thank you very much for having come here. Thank you for your information about this very important topic, which is not being discussed widely. Let's hope that law enforcement bodies will work more actively and all the criminals will be punished. Thank you very, very much. And please come with your favorites to the dog march on the 23rd of May, 11 a.m. The meeting is next to the Ministry of Interior, 10 Bohomoltsa Street. Thank you.